Today we are invited to one of the most famous birthday parties in literature, to the banquet Herod gave for his courtiers and officers and the leaders of Galilee. Probably no other event except the Passion of Christ was more interesting and stimulating for artists than this birthday party. There are a lot of paintings and plays, and there's an opera, and it has become part of several movies. But it is not famous for the food or the good music. It's famous for the dance of Herod's stepdaughter, Salome, and its gruesome consequences. Herod is so pleased with Salome's performance that he swears, and this part is important, he swears that he will fulfill her one wish. Salome at first does not know what to ask for, and she runs to her mom for advice. And Herodias knows exactly what she wants: John the Baptist's head on a platter. She holds a grudge against him since he criticized her marriage with Herod, brother and sister-in-law, as adultery. And Herod delivers. The last dish served that night is John the Baptist's head. This passage is so well known that we have gotten used to the monstrosity of the story. It is a deeply disturbing event. And you might ask, and rightly so, why do I preach on this passage today? What has this political tragedy of 2,000 years ago to say to us today? And I pass the question on to the creators of our lectionary, the Common Revised Lectionary. Why did they include it? To animate our summer? Where's the good news in the story? Where's the hope, the healing, the salvation? I think the question that lies beneath all the other questions is, why did Mark decide to include this passage about John's death the way he did and where he did? So let's take a look back to the passage prior to today's, to last week's gospel reading. Jesus comes to Nazareth, his hometown, and is rejected by his people there. They won't hear him out, and he can't do anything. He is powerless. He leaves Nazareth, and he sends out his 12 disciples. They shall go out in pairs of 2 and preach and heal. And they shall also be prepared to be rejected. If Jesus hasn't already been well known at this point, the disciples' work certainly helps to promote his name. Now even Herod hears of him. The news of Jesus and his movement have now arrived at the topmost level of society, the political elite, corrupt, powerful, and dangerous. The last prophet who came to the attention of this class was John, and he died a horrible death. The next prophet who will die is Jesus. John's life and death foreshadow Jesus. Like the people of Nazareth rejected Jesus, Herod rejects John. But their relationship is more complex. Herod actually likes to listen to John when he tells him the truth. And what John says to Herod leaves Herod greatly perplexed. Herod considers John a righteous and holy man. He protects John from Herodias' wish to kill him by putting him in protective custody in a prison cell. Herod had made a connection to John and to his message. He enjoys listening to a man who calls him an adulterer. Why? Maybe because sometimes the truth draws us in. The truth may be sharp, hard-edged, and almost unbearable, but it hits a nerve. Truth will set you free, as the Gospel of John says. The whole verse reads, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The truth that God is love, that God is at work in the broken, weak, and powerless, that God is forgiveness, that God's justice is not human justice. God's truth doesn't promise power and wealth, but it gives hope that we can become whole. Not being torn between what we want and what we do. not being torn between the love for ourselves and the love of our neighbor, between our faith in God and our life in this world. And Herod seems to sense this new dimension in what John tells him: repentance, forgiveness, healing, a new life. However, Herod remains the tragic character in the story. Out of regard for his oath and for the guests, though deeply grieved, he orders John's beheading. Afraid of losing his face, his honor, his status, he chooses the easy path. He hears the good news, but doesn't take the next step and leaps to action. He encounters the gospel, hears its challenge, glimpses its beauty, but then turns away. The Black theologian Debbie Thomas wrote an essay on this gospel passage, and it has inspired a lot of thoughts in my sermon today. By the way, if you don't know her, she serves at St. Mark's Episcopal here in Palo Alto. And she asked these questions. How about us? We are not killing people to save our face. But we do care a lot about what other people think about us, don't we? Do we care too much? We value status and reputation, and we like to be popular. Do we rank these higher than truth? We prefer harmony and conflict-free living, even if it is only on the surface? Even if our passivity harms others? We do like the known and prefer stability and safety, even if transformation would improve life for others? When we choose silence for the sake of convenience, whose life becomes expendable? When we decide that justice is too messy, too chaotic, and costly for us to pursue, who suffers in the long term? Whose vulnerability do we depend on and benefit from to keep our own comforts intact? The last prophet who came to the attention of the powerful was John, and he died a horrible death. The next prophet who will die is Jesus. He dies also on demand and order of the most powerful. He dies despite having been declared innocent by Pontius Pilate. He dies because, again, Pontius Pilate chooses convenience over justice, personal status and reputation over truth, conflict avoidance over conscience. Jesus dies on the cross, a horrible death. But, and I guess that's the good news today, the story doesn't end here, not at the cross. The work of God proclaiming God's love, God's forgiveness, God's justice, and God's work in the broken, weak, and powerless continues with his followers who come and bury his tortured body, the followers who confess Jesus as Christ, openly, publicly. The story continues as it spreads over the known world with Paul. It lived through the centuries where people of every age and color proclaimed it, and in its name stood up against injustice, corruption, and abuse, and suffered the consequences when those in power tried to silence their voices. The story continues until today, where people of all ages, color, gender, stand up and speak for each other and against discrimination, racism, and hate crime. And yes, it still takes courage, and it's still dangerous. The story of proclaiming God in word and action will continue tomorrow. And you? Where will you be? And what will you do?